We are going to move to my next little focus, which is called Changemakers. I want to invite up to the stage Danielle Bartz, the Mayor's Director of Boards and Commissions, and Dr. Asada Richards, and Holly Franklin-Rosenau, and Nancy Scarnell. I had this vision that for this part of our program, I want to just interact with these people that I admire and wanted to get to know better. So they may know wherever you want, dear. It doesn't make any difference. There is no particular rhyme nor reason to these four people. They don't know one another necessarily, although they may. They're just people that I know that I wanted us to hear from. We're entering into a phase of marketing that was tied to this concept of be the change maker. And it's kind of taking the concept of Houston Strong and Houston's resiliency and what part will you play as a realtor into your neighborhood, into your community, into your sphere of influence, which might be millennials. It could be dog lovers, it could be the Jewish community, it could be those aging in place. It didn't really matter to me, but I wanted to bring together a group of people who could offer some perspectives kind of tied to where we are as a city with regards to real estate and the people who live and work and play in our city, and what we do to attract those people, what we do to engage those people, what we do to make their lives more enjoyable, more livable, easier for them to stay in place if they could, what's pricing them out of particular neighborhoods or out of neighborhoods that they traditionally lived in. And so I just gathered together these four individuals, and we prepared a couple of questions to get some dialogue going, but it is designed to be interactive for you to ask questions and interact with the group. We're going to talk for about an hour and 15 minutes, try and make good use of their time, and just kind of see where this leads us. There's no predetermined place of where we're going here. So, just to be clear again one more time on these introductions, Danielle is the millennial face of the Turner administration, and she is the Director of Boards and Commissions. And how that relates, she is trying to do two or three things. One is to make sure the decision makers, the boards and commissions that make up our city, are reflective of our city today and the city that we want to become. And to ensure that these boards are as diverse and as possible. I mean, the Planning Commission, we specifically work on that to ensure that it is 50% female on the Planning Commission. That's a pretty significant endeavor over there. So we're constantly, and it is at the direction of the mayor every time that there are vacancies, and I am fortunate that I get to at least interact a little bit, both with the mayor and with Danielle. And his challenge is always for us to find someone younger, someone of color, someone disabled, someone underrepresented, someone who has not had a voice at that table. Are we searching those people out on a regular basis and giving them the opportunity to engage with the city? Danielle's a really important person to know. If you know people, if you see people that want to participate in the governing and the management of our city and the surrounding areas, she gets emails every day of resumes of people, and we are looking for people who are not rich white men that we refer to, that want to, I get to be the token rich white man on a couple of boards and commissions, but we're looking for people who offer a variety of things. And so truly, the younger ones, it's harder to arrange the amount of time that's necessary. But truly, the Planning Commission, we are on a hunt, a major deal for someone who's disabled. They could be blind, they could be in a wheelchair. They need to know about ramps and access to sidewalks and these sort of things and how they relate to us replanting these particular areas. But so we're very honored to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Holly is with Houston First, which is the chief marketing officer for the Greater Houston Convention Visitors Bureau, now known as Visit Houston, which is tied to Houston First, which is the mechanism that's designed to promote Houston. Promote Houston for conventions, but to promote people just to our city and our economic engines, which could be restaurants, could be medical, can be golfing community. It can be spread out. And so we thought it would be interesting to hear from her perspective of what people perceive of Houston. I was curious, and we'll talk about what Houston First and Visit Houston would do post-flooding to combat the image of Houston as a city that floods, both for conventions and for people who might be relocating to this area. Miss Nancy Sarnoff is with the Houston Chronicle, and her podcast Looped In or whatever. Hopefully, if you're in real estate, you've had some interaction with Nancy Sarnoff and you read her column regularly. She is well entrenched into the Houston residential and commercial real estate world and what's happening both in the past and in the future. So we're very honored to have you here. Thank you for being here. And one of my favorite people is Dr. Asada Richards. You just want to get to know Asada Richards if you ever get the chance to. I think she's brilliant, and I love to visit with her and hear her speak on her community engagement, community involvement, her issues dealing with housing and affordability. She's on the forefront of these items as they relate not only to a neighborhood that she's well entrenched into, but every neighborhood in our city. And we're just honored to have you here, and thank you so much for being here. So, we want to start with just a moment. If you would maybe go down the line and tell us where you live and why you live there, and what was the driving force and maybe that determination of where it is that you live today. Go right ahead.
So this is exciting. I'm a brand new homeowner. That was not an easy process. I have been in Houston this time around since June of 2015, and I was in River Oaks right there at Shepherd and Welch, living in the extra bedroom of my brother's condo. And I recently bought a single family home in Eastwood. So on Leland Street, 2.5 miles east of the Georgia Brown Convention Center. I guess they all know this.
We're supposed to.
I was like, I don't know if I should say that. So brand new as a Christmas day in that 1,200 square foot home built in 1925. And I chose Greater Eastwood, one, because I could afford it. Two, because my first priority was that I could afford the bills every month. My second priority was that I could drive to work without a highway. And third, I wanted character. I wanted it to look like HGTV. So I bought a home that's 93 years old, and it is going to be a long time before it looks like anything on Fixer Upper. It apparently takes more than an hour, guys. So that's where I live.
I live in the historic 3rd Ward. It is the neighborhood in which my grandparents migrated to from East Texas. It's a neighborhood where my parents lived when I was born. And it's a neighborhood where I graduated from the University of Houston. I went to Penn State and got a PhD and lived in Pittsburgh and felt really strong about coming back to Houston and the community, which really gave my life character and shaped and defined me. And so for me, it's living in a neighborhood that has a heartbeat and that has really strong connections to people, and that has a spirit of interdependence and a spirit of really collective efficacy, and that the neighborhood is defined by its culture and its heritage. Living in Pittsburgh, if anybody knows Pittsburgh, each neighborhood has its own character and feel, and I really wanted that when I moved back to Houston. And so I'm still a renter in an affordable housing community development community, but I recently purchased a historic shotgun house, which is a West African architectural style, which many people don't know that West Africans built these shotgun houses, which off the ground flow of ventilation and interiors that create a flow of cool air. And so I am now rehabbing that historic house on Holman Street in the historic part, which was traditionally African American in 3rd Ward.
And you're going to live there?
I'm going to live there. There is nothing that can move me from 3rd Ward unless I just get sick and somebody say, we have to take her someplace. My shotgun house is under 900 square feet. Yeah, and it really fits me. I lived in a big space in Pittsburgh, and when I moved here, I moved to a small space, and it's all the space I need. I want to say this small thing. What happens in these communities is that our private space is our living space, but the public space is the space that we share with others. So we don't traditionally use large living spaces because that's just for our private living. And then the parks and the front yard and the back porches is where we share common space. And that's the tradition in which I've bought into.
That's a great story, Anita. So you might be hearing from me, and that's actually why I'm taking notes, because I'm always looking for people to interview who bought or sold a house, and I'm probably called on some of you to help me find them, and I just found two. And I'm writing a story about this tomorrow, so that's great. So let's see, I was long time renter. Kind of moved from one neighborhood to the next inside the loop, really. Kind of wanted to live everywhere I could and experience different areas. And then I moved into the Spring Branch area and had a child, and then about 5 years ago we decided to buy in Spring Valley, which is not too far from there. It's in that area, obviously, just north of I-10. And you know, I think we bought there, we wanted to be inside the loop, but it was, you know, 2011, 2012 when we were looking, and you guys know what was happening during that time. In fact, the last house we bid on was in the Heights, I think on 7.5 Street, and it was just this tiny, tiny house that was on the market for, I don't know, somewhere in the high threes, which at that point was not cheap at all. And I think we did around asking price, and it ended up selling for way more than $400,000. And so we were just like, okay, we're not getting inside the loop. It's just not going to happen. And so we did stretch our budget, and we bought this place in Spring Valley, and it was I think the cheapest house in the neighborhood at the time, and still probably is. But we bought because primarily schools, because we have this little daughter, and so it's zoned to great schools, and we thought that would really help maintain the value of the home. And so as our daughter was reaching pre-K age, and we were getting her ready to go to school in this cute little school, just walkable from our house, I heard about another school that was in the area about 2 miles away that offered a dual language program, and I thought that was really interesting, and I knew some people that were sending their kids there, and so that school wasn't or isn't as advantaged as the school around the corner from us, but I toured both schools, and I thought, you know what, this is something that I would not be able to give her otherwise, and we ended up putting her in this other school. So she can't, she's not walking to school, she's not going to school with the little neighborhood kids, but I just felt like it was a really great opportunity to be, to put her there and to help sort of, I felt like I could help make change in that school in a way that I couldn't in the neighborhood school, which already had a lot of, volunteers and a lot of money, frankly, going into it. So that's.
Is that a Spanish school language?
It is.
So I too was holding on to the inner loop as much as I could. I was just completely offended by the drive. I grew up in Conroe, so I remember when the drive was like 30 minutes to downtown, not 30 minutes to the Woodlands. And so I 7 years ago became pregnant with my first child. We lived on Washington Avenue, loved our town mountain. Then I had my child and realized that 23 stairs between the second and the third level was not going to be something that I was going to deal with once he started to grow and become a toddler. But I really wanted to hold on to the inside the loop concept. Working downtown, it makes life easy. I can spend more work time. I don't have to deal with the stress of the roads. And we found, it was right before the boom, we found this little neighborhood called Timber Grove. that was undiscovered at the time. Not undiscovered anymore. And on our street, and we had probably at that time, 80% of the people were original homeowners and had lived there and told you stories about when they built their house and the neighbor across the street. You could tell that this neighborhood had this sense of community of a small town, literally on the edge of the loop. And then it also, the remaining 20 to 30%, offered the diversity that was reflective of urban Houston that we all know and love. Now, the majority of the original homeowners have since passed away. And the new crop, the next generation, is preserving that sense of community. So it really, I think, I could have said we took a gamble at the time before the big boom happened, and certainly there is investment opportunity on the positive side for us, but it was nice to see that this community that has all of the urban elements around it really kept a pristine sense of community and neighbors. So that's where we live today, and St. Clair is our elementary school, and we love it to death. And we're looking forward to staying there for the long term.
Okay, Nancy, why don't we just start with you since we're in real estate here, and give us your take on where you think the real estate market is today and where it's headed in 2018. Any idea?
Yeah, that's what I ask people. That's
You
not what
missed my
I'm
presentation earlier.
I'm just gonna turn this around. You guys can answer that question. But that is a really hard question right now, kind of where we're going, just because of what happened last year with the flood, and you know, so many things changed, and I don't think I'm going to tell you guys anything that you don't know, but the multifamily market, the glut turned around immediately, and so many apartments have been filling up, and the housing market, obviously, I think it's just hard to talk about Houston real estate as a whole, because it's, you know, we've got so many different disparate neighborhoods that were affected in different ways by the flood. I think we're in this time where more than half of the city is doing fine. They've forgotten about RV for the most part. They're living their lives. Wealthy neighborhoods, I think, are recovering a whole lot faster. And then there's this other side where there's a lot more distress in the real estate market because so many of these people didn't have flood insurance, and so they are, they're just trying to hold on to their properties and pay their existing mortgages and then pay for separate housing. Or we've done some really incredible stories on people who are living through this and just don't have the means to move out of their homes, so they're living upstairs and they're using hot plates and doing what they can. But so I think on the positive side, a lot of what I've been hearing from the economists and the sort of the bigger picture is the economy in Houston is still doing pretty well, and oil prices, which everyone likes to talk about. I'm by no means an expert or even that well informed about the energy industry, but with oil prices around $60, if they stay this way for a while, then I think the Federal Reserve said Houston could gain 75,000 jobs this year, so that is really good news for the housing market and for everyone here, because all those people need homes. What I'm concerned about next year is neighborhoods that were affected by the storm, where the bulk of the homes in the neighborhoods were affected, and investors are starting to go in and buy these properties. And so I think we're going to have some neighborhoods, maybe far out west in Katy, that become rental enclaves now. and how is that going to impact the homeowner associations, and that, I think, concerns me the most. And I hope to do some in-depth coverage of these neighborhoods, and see, kind of look what, follow what happens throughout the year.
Sure. So we've been talking as a group, the areas that didn't flood certainly get a fresh eye. We're entrenched into the Heights, although hopefully people think that we're entrenched into the other areas, but we talk about affordable housing and affordability. And people, my son there's 24, he cannot afford to consider the Heights. He's gonna have to look at new areas, much like the Heights were 20 years ago. The areas of Denver Harbor, the areas of Acres Home, the areas, to the east side of I-10, on the other side of 59, some of these areas that don't look pristine but have ample opportunity. There is affordable housing in our city. People just look at the $500,000 house, they want the $150,000 one to look the same way, and it's just not going to. So we're hoping that this gives us an opportunity to explore some of those other areas, but then at the same time, Asada, dealing with that culture of those neighborhoods and the gentrification and the displacement issues that come along with it at the same time. It's a constant battle across the world. I've been studying it now for many years about how do you increase the wealth of families, yet make it affordable for them to be able to stay there, and what from the public policy side could be done there. But Asada, you want to start us on what you see happening as a result of some of that, where we're going with affordability and gentrification?
Well, I think we have an excellent opportunity. I think one, a lot of the eyes are on Houston, and they were on Houston before Harvey, and they're on Houston even more so, with a lot of conversation about Houston being so diverse and all of this, that Houston on the radar has been spotlighted. However, I think that the challenge that has come, one, I just want to tell you that the no zoning issue is an issue that makes Houston look very odd and strange, and it creates a lot of suspicion. And I'll tell you, before Harvey, I would have just dismissed it, and I say you dismiss it, just say you're Houston. But people see the implications of no zoning now. They see the damage of no zoning to communities and to families. And I think that now Houston then has to say, we're not going to become a zoning city. That's clear, and we don't have to be. But what can we do that's practical and that creates sustainability and also that creates greater equity? Because Houston is now being seen as a very inequitable city across the country when you talk to, the development community, and also when you talk to funders and people who look at Houston. And one of the things that they say is that Houston has no public policies to really create any stability and predictability in its operations, right? So even developers will say when they come to our community, well, we didn't know because we don't have an understanding of what the policies are around development, around preferred design, around all of these issues, right? We have people come from Australia, and after they come to the neighborhood meeting, they say, we would have never bought this property if we would have known that this was counter to what the community wanted. So I think that what is happening is a great opportunity, because now we are now talking about these issues that we weren't willing to talk about before. The effects of development, unregulated, unrestricted development, the ability to create sustainable neighborhoods that are flood-proof or flood-resistant. So I think that there's an opportunity to kind of talk in a shared conversation with the real estate community, with the development community, with the finance community, and with neighborhoods about how do we move forward in a way that keeps the economic engine moving, but also has a consideration for communities and what communities want. And so I think that for us, is also being able to build that conversation and have that conversation in a way where we're not at odds with each other, but starting with a clear understanding. We all want a community where people can live, work, and play. We all want a city where the industry is moving, where development is happening, the real estate community stays active and stays in business, because that's what drives us. But what are some other important issues that are for us? Quality of schools, walkability, right? flow of traffic that allows for biking, that allows for walking, right? We want amenities in communities so that we don't clog up our freeways, having to go outside our community for grocery stores and parks and just recreations, right? So I think, Bill, what this is saying to us is how can we come to the table, because we're a city that doesn't come to the table together. We sit in our separate enclaves and we work and do the best work possible, but we don't interconnect that work, right? And so being able to say from across the board, from development to real estate to community economics and amenities, how can we have a shared table where we put all those values on that table and we make decisions in this city with the input of communities, but that bring all of those forces together. And I think the work that you did for the mayor for the quality of life was attempting to do that. How do we ask all these questions as we plan and make decisions for the city, particularly for neighborhoods? So I think the challenge is going to be for us to move outside of the way we've done business in Houston, where everyone goes at it on their own, that entrepreneurial spirit, to more collaboration.
We've discussed how 4-year terms kind of helped guide some of that. They can guide a public policy that it wasn't just 10 months and run for re-election, and with the current status, you get something done in 8 years that you just probably couldn't get with 2-year terms. So I think we have, once pension reform is done, it's kind of resets the box again, say, okay, now let's go do, we got our financial house in order, let's go do the next round of what it takes to make a world-class city. Yes, Jim?
Yeah. So this is just an idea. It may not be a great idea, but everybody, everybody I talk to in my neighborhood, I tell them I'm the mayor of Newgate. But y'all should have like the mayor of the 3rd Ward, and where you could do a YouTube video that we could use that talks about what are the great things about the 3rd Ward neighborhood, what the houses start at, what they. What's the most expensive house in the 3rd Ward? What's the cheapest house in the 3rd Ward? All the amenities, because prior to you coming in, Bill had talked about it for 10 or 15 minutes, about walkability and riding your bike. It's not necessarily about the house per se, it's about what the neighborhood offers, that what makes the neighborhood so great.
Well, I'll say your colleague Cindy George did a story in the Houston Chronicle about the mayors of neighborhoods. So to a question that Bill asked in our discussion about preparing for this, the super neighborhoods are very important places for, I think, the real estate community to go. Because at the super neighborhoods, you get a feel for who's at the table and who's not at the table. And you know that every community has a story. I want to say this and be very honest about this. I'm not a person that my house is a significant identifier for me. My house is it's the dwelling in which I live. And so for me, I didn't need the pristine house and structure. I really didn't. That was my preference. But what I needed, and I was willing to sacrifice for it, I needed to be in a community where I wasn't a stranger. I needed to be in a community where people really valued me and wanted to be with me in community. So I think that part of what the real estate community does, because what happens in our community, and I'll tell you what happens, is that they take the blurb. So I know Bill knows this. MIT did a study on our neighborhood from a real estate development. And they went to the real estate community to see what they said about our neighborhood, right? And they put these words and these quotes into a report, right? And you can see the real estate community just skimming off the top, selling to people what it felt that they wanted to hear, which created an adversarial relationship, right? I'll help you sell as many houses as you want to sell. I will be your best advocate, but that has to be a partnership. And so being able to go into the super neighborhoods, sitting with the civic associations, asking them to help you bring in the people that they want into the neighborhood and be able to bring in more customers to you. And I think that that relationship works very well because we all are on the same side. I want you to sell houses, and you want to sell houses, and I want you to sell houses to people who want to be in community, which makes the work of community sustainable. And for those people who don't, there are very much communities where people don't want to be with you. And they don't care if you knock on their door. They don't care if you're a neighbor. And I think that people should have the right to live in those communities. I think we just have to do a better job of making sure people get a community that fits what they need and not what we want them to have. Because at the end of the day, that creates a better city for all of us. And being realistic, there's my community, we walk, but we don't have, we just did a built environment study with the traffic engineers. The quality of our sidewalks are very poor, the quality of our structures, but we walk. We have a high walking because economically we have to walk, right? We walk out of the need. So it's important to sell that house and say, listen, this is a neighborhood where walking happens, but the infrastructure is not here. But we have an active civic associations, super neighborhoods, they're working on these issues around walking. And let them know that to come into the neighborhood, to get those sidewalks, they're gonna have to participate in the civic process for that to happen. It's not gonna happen without that participation. And I think that's a fair thing to tell people, because some people wanna do that, and some people say, no, I love how Houstonians say this, Bill and David Mintzberg. So David Mintzberg is a very good friend of mine. And people say we don't have sidewalks. And then I visit David's house often, and I say, and David lives in a nice neighborhood, they don't have sidewalks either. So this is an issue around the city that's just an issue. And being realistic about it, I think is important.
All right, Holly, let's pick up with you. We have this little event called Harvey.
Yes.
And you're tasked with increasing the visibility of our city around the state and the nation. And what are we going to do different messaging to combat the people who are thinking about relocating their business here or thinking about bringing their convention and their family here, especially over the summer. In April, I think it's going to be a little tougher to get to conventions if they think they're going to have to evacuate.
So I'm going to tell you something that I even have a hard time believing. I've been trying for the last 2 months to find a problem. We have had, I'm going to give you a perspective on this. 5 years ago, in terms of conventions, and conventions are important to us. It's important to the business community, it's important for tourism, it's important for sales tax, it's important for hotel occupancy tax, because those that come to visit have a higher propensity to come and move here, we know that. So 4 years ago, we were booking around 575,000 hotel room nights, so those equivalent of probably 57 conventions for future years, so it's a future investment. We ended this year, 2017, with 810,000. We haven't released the number, we're going through an audit. Public relations, we ended at record levels. Tourism, we ended at record levels. So I have 13 research studies that go on with the Wall Street Journal, with RAM, with Kantar, the largest research firm in the world. We are now doing omnibus studies to see if possibly there are any flaws. So we're trying to find the problem in terms of public perception. And part of that comes, and I was in the thick of it, Daniel was in the thick of it when it came to Harvey. What 2017 gave our organizations in the city in terms of work from the Super Bowl to the end of the year was amazing. But and I think it's important for us to ingest this when it comes to why Harvey didn't stick like we thought it would. August 25th through August 31st was Hurricane Harvey. The costliest natural disaster in U.S. history at $125 billion. And I'm sure it will grow, but that was the official release of the $125 billion. September 1st, I was standing, and Daniel and I spent a lot of time at George R. Brown, which was the main evacuation center for our guests that were victims of displacement. September 1st, I was standing downstairs with ABC News. They didn't want to talk about Harvey anymore. They wanted to talk about when they were going to relocate to Florida because Irma was coming. Irma, literally days after, resulted in the largest mass evacuation in U.S. history. Irma happened from September 6th to September 12th. That was the gist of the storm. We didn't evacuate people from the George R. Brown until September 18th. That is mind-blowing. Then, Hurricane Maria happened September 19th. September 19th to the 22nd. Again, these are just the gist of the storm. There are bookended issues that happened with each of these incidents, which was the worst natural disaster on record in Dominica and Puerto Rico. part of our culture, part of our country. 10 days later was the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in the United States, in Las Vegas. And California wildfires happened in December. And in the midst of it, we won the World Series. So when you think about top of mind awareness, Houston obviously in 2017 and at the end of the third quarter was the first major natural disaster that happened. And we all know, we all felt the hope and love and sense of neighbors as we all banded together to help our neighbors and help the victims. People saw that. That was the first story out. Now, you edge that with all of these other natural epic disasters, and everyone claiming a first or a worst. And that really kind of confused top of mind awareness of what not only was happening now, but what could be in the future for our world, our globe, for global warming. So in the midst of it, what we found is that from a convention standpoint, we didn't have one convention, by the way, canceled. Not one. We closed the convention center on September 18th, and the first convention was September 19th. 24 hours later. We had had record-breaking conventions, and people wanted to be part of the passion and the narrative that they saw. We turned away how many times people bringing supplies? People not just from Houston. We couldn't handle field the number of calls of people wanting to come. We didn't have anywhere to put them. We didn't have anywhere to put the stuff. We were overwhelmed by all of the care and the passion. So in all of this, the reason why I'm painting this picture is because when we started conducting research, and we conducted our first omnibus study in November, we did it during the World Series, but not after the conclusion, where Houston obviously won. And we found, when we were looking at our target audiences, and that's the report we're going to pass out to you so you can see, is we've been targeting people 35, 54 with higher income, because that's what research had told us was our core target, and also previous overnight target from previous years, which had the highest propensity to come back. So we were targeting two different targets. What we found from this first omnibus study is that while our core has remained flat over the last now 7 months, millennials have peaked in terms of numbers. When we used to chase millennials and everyone wanted to get the millennial, we stopped chasing the millennials, started focusing on short term, and now millennials, in terms of percentage increase from a target demographic that is looking at Houston as an interest, has more than doubled in the last 7 months. So we're trying to find a flaw in that research too. So we're conducting 4 more omnibus studies to see if maybe over the last 7 months, the pendulum has not shifted in terms of interest in Houston, but who specifically is now looking at Houston. And we all know that millennials are compelled by authentic spaces and authentic experiences. My guesstimate, and this is not for a fact, but we're going to try to prove this case, is that what Harvey, of all of it, in terms of this particular target segment that we're seeing peaking, Harvey created the authentic messaging for Houston that we never could have done, because they saw firsthand cultures coming together and people coming together, and that's like the interest. Again, we have to verify this, and we will be verifying, hopefully, a conclusion over the next 6 months. But it was shocking. It was the first time in 10 years of documenting data, demographic profiles, psychographic profiles, interests, attributes, that we have seen a gigantic move. And that move is younger and less affluent. And I think that that is a very interesting thing that will affect all of us in the future if it proves to be true. And once we validate everything, we'll be releasing it. But I mean, it's a pendulum shift of more than double. You don't ever see that in demographics, but you don't always have the largest natural disaster in U.S. history happen.
But I think, if I can just confirm the conversation, I think that that's true. And I think the test will be when we do the year out, Houston year out.
Yeah.
And if neighborhoods, if the issues around the rebuilding of those neighborhoods, if those issues are not addressed, and the news cameras come a year later And Houston has not created a plan and a policy which addresses all of these neighborhoods and all of these communities and vulnerable people who have been displaced. If that's not a story that said that Houston strong, then that authenticity that we got for that moment will not hold up. And I think we need to be clear about that, because people's memories shift and change. And so I think that Houston has a challenge to be able to make good on the image it presented to the world. And I think how we move forward over the next 1 to 5 years and what happens, because it becomes a New Orleans, if it becomes, a New Jersey, the East Coast, if it doesn't come a story where it says that Houston truly does care, not in the temporary, then that authenticity, I think, will come back to bite us, because we put such a wonderful story forth to the nation of who we were.
And those stories have already run. There have been at least 7 national stories that has talked about what you do, and not just Houston, but how Houston is going to become the white paper for other low-lying large cities that, some consider, you're looking at Raleigh or Houston, you're going to say Houston's overpopulated. But we also want a lot of growth. You can't have both. You can't be the cool Raleigh, which is the next it city because it's so intimate and has all the green space, and also compete with New York and Chicago and LA. You can't have it both ways. So we know the way we're going. We're growing. New Orleans is growing. Parts of Florida are growing. We all have the same underlying issue in terms of topography and geography. And it's up to Harris County and the city working together, which I understand they are, to work on what that map looks like and what that plan looks like 1 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years and 10 to 20 years, because we can't keep up with our growth. And we have to.
I'll make a little side note studying it. We have a hell of a lot of plans and drawers and office buildings throughout our whole city. We need less planning and more action.
Right.
And we need more immediate action in order for it, because this mayor is very good. He has so much time, and no matter what he plans on doing, the next mayor is going to have a different plan. And so what you get to do is on your watch. And I think it is the time for action. I think it's time to put some of these policies, and some of them will be experimental. You don't have to have a policy for the entire city. You can pick a specific geographic area and say, this is the pilot. We're going to move there with density. We're going to move there with parking. We're going to move there with sustainability. We're going to move there with building codes, and test it out. And if it works, everyone will want it. And if it won't, then you can say, you can't fault us for trying.
That's right.
Can't fault us for trying. Just want to have you all, we spend a lot of time on those marketings on food and culinary capital of the world. We spend a lot of time on arts, all of which are important. I'm a huge proponent of both. You see us continuing that message. You see the message changing to transportation and accessibility.
Well, I think that certainly transportation and accessibility are nuggets and details that you need as part of any city. But our research continues to show us, and I think you want to probably show one of the videos, that Houston's attributes that have peaked over the last 7 years have been culinary and culture. And the word culture means different things to different people. That means multicultural, that means art, but the word culture, and then the attribute which we've attached to that, which is inspired, an elevated way of thinking, an elevated way of communicating, problem solving, that back at the can-do mantra that Bill White and East Parker and Mayor Turner have all put forth, which is absolutely accurate, reflective of our destination. So we have one of the main videos that is used throughout the United States and the world, which helps to market and frame the top of mind awareness for Houston.
Houston is inspired.
Almost everything about my life as it is right now is directly tied back to my time in Houston.
Doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you're going to find a corner of this city to say, that's my town.
It's a wonderful town.
I feel eternally connected to Houston, Texas.
We're 1,000 miles from comfort. We have traveled land and sea. But as long as you are with me, there's no place I'd rather be. With With every step we take, Kyoto to the bay, strolling so casually. We're different and the same, give you another name, switch up the batteries. If you gave me a chance, I would take it. It's a shot in the dark, but I'll make it. No, with all of your heart, you can't shake me. When I am with you, there's no place I'd rather be. No, 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 no place I'd rather be. No, 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 no place I'd rather be. It's easy being with you, sacred simplicity. And as long as we're together, there's no place I'd rather be. With every step we take, Kyoto to the bay, strolling so casually. We're different and the same, get you another name, switch up the batteries. If you gave me a chance, I would take it. It's a shot in the dark, but I'll make it. No, with all of your heart, you can't shake me. When I am with you, there's no place I'd rather be. No, 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 no place I'd rather be. No, 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 no place I'd rather be. When I am with you, there's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be.
That's powerful.
Where can we get a copy of that?
It's on, we have the video, you can send them to them.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube channel on Visit Houston. We have about 70 videos. You can free to use any of them. Certainly, we love Cam a lot. She's pretty amazing.